start it right now. So I'm going to say welcome to everybody to week 3 of Soul Talks here with me, Leslie at Daily Apple, and MJ at Soul Fuel Fitness. For those of you, we've got a good amount of people online today, so that's great. Thank you for joining us live, and some people are going to be watching this on demand. Before I introduce our guest today, I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping rules for those of you that are on. Hello, somebody just jumped on. I'm going to get you to turn your camera off so that when we're recording, we're only seeing Jen and myself chatting. Thank you so much. And then also muting your speaker if you haven't done so already. That will just allow for lack of background noise for us. But we want you to participate. Generally, it goes sort of anywhere between 20 minutes and half an hour, depending on how juicy it gets between me and Jen. And then we open it up to questions. So there's a chat function, and type in your questions. I will also, if you want to speak live, you can unmute yourself. Last week, we had most people doing it in the chat box, but it's really up to you. And so I will give you some ample opportunity to open that up. So we are going to start, and we're talking about a really difficult conversation for me to have. I really wanted to open this up. It started to become more mainstream and people being more open about this conversation. So we're talking about alcohol and the role it plays in women's lives. And I'm with Jen McNeely. So Jen, I have a bio here that I'm going to read, and then Jen, I'm going to let you take over and you can fill in any gaps that I may have missed. So I first became acquainted with Jen online because she's the founder of She Does the City, which I think so many people in Toronto follow. It's a great online publication, and it's real life community dedicated to sharing the stories, projects, and accomplishments of Canadian women, connecting one another through creative events and thought-provoking culture. And before launching She Does the City in 2007, my gosh, was it 2007? 13 years ago. Good for you. Jen worked in publicity and marketing at Much Music. So for those of you guys that follow our talks, I did interview Erica M. a couple months back, Alliance Films and CBC Television. She's also written for Toronto Life Fashion Magazine now and the Globe and Mail. And what isn't on her She Does the City bio is that Jen is a fierce advocate for women's recovery. And I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that before we go into our questions, because I believe it's called She Recovers, and you started a chapter here in Toronto. Is that correct, Jen?
Yeah, so I guess a few years ago, I went to a conference in New York City. It would have been 2016. And I didn't really know what I was walking into. I was just invited to go down and be part of the Sober Blogger panel. And when I went, I walked into a room with 500 women recovering out loud. And the tone and feeling of that space was incredibly different to what my experience had been in recovery up to that point. I was used to going to meetings in church basements around Toronto, and it was much more just a different feeling, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think AA is a wonderful place, and it helped me immensely for my first 2 years of sobriety. And I don't think I would have coped without it, especially at that point when there was a lot less available. But I think it's really refreshing that there are lots more options these days, and that it has become, recognized that everybody recovers a little bit differently, and we all have to find our own path. And it's just really important that there are options out there for people who may not jive with AA for various reasons, or other models. So when I went down there, I was blown away with what they were doing, because it really is a community that's founded in self-confidence. It's founded in the best word I could use to describe it is that there's a brightness about it. Just the room, the way everybody looked, everybody was a little bit more smiling. And, I think in other types of recovery models, you really focus on your flaws and your differences. And in She Recovers, it was really about focusing on your strengths. And,
right. And it feels very inclusive. I've read a little bit about your group here in Toronto, and you know, I think one of the taglines is because somebody's recovering from, like, there's lots of things to be recovering from. It's inclusive.
That's the thing too. It's really about acknowledging that recovery is a spectrum. So, you know, and that you don't have to hit rock bottom, whatever that looks like, to seek help, because for a lot of people, you know, drinking too much can mean something as simple as, you know what, I can't cope without 2 glasses of wine a day.
Yeah.
And that's enough that's not working for them.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you know, and then other people, it's like, it's a much more serious issue. They're day drinking, they're, you know, hiding bottles in their purse, they're, you know, drinking behind the wheel or whatever, you know, but it can look 1,000 different ways. And, and I think that one of the things about She Recovers is that it acknowledges that, yeah, like, get help before it gets to that point. But also, if you are at that point, like, it's there for you too.
Yeah, it's there for you too, right.
But it is also a community that is about all types of recovery. So anxiety, depression, trauma, divorce, grief, cancer, you know, all of it, because usually we're coming to the table with a few different things. So.
For sure. Well, and that's just it. And I think that's a good sort of segue into our first question. So for those of you that are just joining, again, welcome. And the way that we do these Soul Talks, which is a partnership between Daily Apple and Soul Fuel, I've actually been doing talks for a while now through Daily Apple and Apple Tree. And we always do something called the Fresh in 5 series. So I kind of throw 5 questions out there. Because of the nature of the topic, it might get a bit dark. It might get a bit uncomfortable. I'm so open to going there, and we're going to go back and forth, me and Jen. We're going to end it on a bit of a light note, just to brighten it up a bit, because sometimes the fresh talks can be a bit fluffy. So not today. So we were just chatting about, you know, people coming in with checking all these different boxes, anxiety, OCD, especially in pandemic, which we're going to get to. But research has shown, and I've been following this really, really closely, that alcohol use, and most importantly, misuse, is increasing, especially in the over 35 category. So I have some ideas about what's sort of driving that statistic. In your experience, Jen, what do you think is happening that is making so many women over the age of 35 use alcohol improperly?
I think probably if you're looking at women over 35, you're going to get a lot more parents than if you were looking at 25. And I think that that's probably what's making that number kind of go up, is that parents today do not have the support, especially moms, that is needed. You know, we're in this, like, there's so many things. Like, when I started figuring, you know, when I was writing a list of like what contributes to this, it's like every fucking thing. Like, you don't need to have childhood trauma to pick up these days. You just need to watch the news. Like, that is enough, right? So there's everything going on. But I think right now with you know, moms, especially in this demo, it's like we're parenting without support, without the village. Like, COVID especially has disrupted that. Our community is, you know, it's been decimated. There's all sorts of different stress levels, whether it's just on a daily basis of, you know, is my kid going to have to stay home for 14 days because he went like, you know, or are they going to pick up COVID from school? Like, what's it like to be in a classroom learning with a mask? That's not the childhood I remember, you know, or is it sort of fears about, like, you know, climate crisis, you know, 20 years ago, what's their adulthood gonna, we have all these fears. And I'm not saying that parents before haven't had these fears, but I think that the amount of, you know, we've been in that kind of crazy hustle culture for a long time right now. And that's one of the things that this whole pandemic has had us sort of reevaluate, is that the unsustainable sort of pace that all of us were moving at, and the lack of support in place for parents, you know, the cost of childcare, like all these different things. It was already really at a breaking point, and then you have COVID on top of it, and it's just collapsing, right? Like, we can't do it. People are beyond burnout. They've hit burnout, and they're just like going on nothing. There's like zero gas there. So
And I saw that, and but we're going to talk about the pandemic a bit more in the chat. But one of the things when I was looking at even before leading up to this, and I have so many friends, and I see some friends who are online who are in really like highly aggressive, high profile jobs.
Yeah.
They're mothers. And there's that whole sort of notion of having to keep up with the Mad Men culture of like, big boozy lunches and let's go out for scotches after. And you don't want to be the one who's like, I have to go home because I've got to take my kid to gymnastics. So, there is that, sometimes I think, pressure in the work culture. One of the things that I'm really faced with is I am the sandwich generation. I've got a really young son. And I've got a really aging parent. I had two up until 3 months ago and lost one, which has, that's a conversation in itself. But, the pain and the stress of that, and just like that fiery fury. The other piece that I was going to add to what I think is driving it a lot is also like physical pain. We talked last week about perimenopause and had a big conversation about that. And so women, especially my age, are going through this insane change. If you have any health problems like endometriosis or any of the stuff that we talked about last week, there's pain, and you don't have the ability, like physical and emotional, and you don't have the capacity always to self-care. And I think sometimes it's a quick fix.
Yeah.
And it's legal, and it's socially acceptable, and it's very easy to get.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about like adding those things, and even
of course, all those things. I mean, it's everything. Everything is related, right? And yeah, so I agree, all those things for sure.
Well, and it's again a good segue into question 2, because it's in the top 5 most addictive drug categories. I didn't in the one list I was looking at, I didn't see caffeine on that, although I think it is there. But it's got some health properties. But heroin, cocaine are number 1, number 2 for addiction. So alcohol, though, it's so socially acceptable. It's part of every culture. It's part of every Thanksgiving feast. It's part of every everything in life. And in fact, to the point where if you don't drink, it can be a social deterrent for certain friendships.
Yeah.
My husband and I always do. So I am, I should have disclosed this at the beginning. Jen, if you hadn't read her bio or heard it, Jen is in recovery, active recovery still. It's been 10 years, I saw. Is that right?
November 5th is my date. So coming up on 10, yeah.
Okay, congratulations. I am someone who does drink. I try to be very mindful about it, but I'm going to chat a little later. I have definitely seen patterns in myself where it has not just been about social and having fun. It has been for darker, more complicated reasons. Yeah. But Chris and I try to be really mindful about it, and we've done, sober September, we do the ban in Jan, we take big chunks of time. And in non-pandemic times, we usually don't drink Monday to Thursday, and we have very dry weeks when we're working. But I've been told sometimes, oh, well, we'll have you over for dinner then when you're done your cleanse. Like when you're done, it's not a cleanse, but when you're not, because you're more fun. And that whole, like Friends, there was the episode with Fun Bobby, and like no one liked him when he got sober.
Yeah.
Like, why is it so okay? Like, but if you went to a party and you were like, hold on, I'm just going to go do some blow on your kitchen table, like people would be like, okay, I can't be friends with Leslie anymore. She's the drug addict. So like, you've had a lot of experience with this, I'm sure. Why is alcohol fine, but shooting up isn't?
I think it just is because it's been fine for so long, and like, look at cannabis now. Cannabis is way more acceptable. Moms are talking about using cannabis. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they wouldn't have been. It's just like a shift of time, and it's big money behind it, right? There's marketing companies. This is corporate, like billions of dollars we're talking about. So, it's being pushed. It is what we're used to. But the good thing is that society is changing, and there is more literature about shifting patterns. There is a lot more people speaking out about it. There is a shift, where sobriety is now becoming a trend and like an aspiration. So that's the good news. The bad news is that you still obviously get situations where, you're at a restaurant and you don't order an alcoholic drink and you get kind of side-eye from the server, like what's
pregnant.
wrong with you? Or you get friends being like uncomfortable. And honestly, it's just, I think it's just that we've been used to something for so long, and people they simply aren't comfortable socializing without it. They've been using it as a way to, be lubricated, right? Like to ease up a bit. And when you've been doing that for so long, the thought of sort of interacting socially without it is almost an impossible idea. But it only is because you haven't been doing it. And it's sort of the same as like working a muscle, like you're going to suck at running if you're doing it for the first time, or you're not going to be very good at lifting weights if you've never done it. It's just about flexing different muscles. And like, thankfully we're changing, because it's being acknowledged that it's not only just unhealthy for, physically, but it bleeds into the family. And also it's not just like this hangovers and that kind of thing. Like, drinking is related to breast cancer. Like, the alcohol intake there are like hard medical statistics about the relationship, but that relationship. So
cancer, heart disease.
It's unignorable.
Absolutely. Especially over the age of 35. That's one of the things in wellness I talk about is like, it's not like you get a free pass, but you're a lot more likely to be able to sort of shed the damage that's done to your body before the age of 25. Between 25 and 35, you kind of coast in this like haze of, but 35, we actually start to kind of go down, which is so depressing, especially as I'm like inching towards 50. But you really do notice those damaging effects a lot more, especially in that age category. I was just going to mention before we go to the next topic is also it's very Canadian. I mean, the branded beer in itself, but it's sort of a rite of passage. Like, most of us, and I'd be curious to know if people want to get involved in the chat if you grew up elsewhere. But growing up in Toronto, especially if you were like I was total party girl in high school. I played a lot of sports. I played a lot of sports with a lot of boys, and there was just this culture of, we drank beer. Like, it's what you did. You drank a lot of beer, and it just sort of continues on. And I have been noticing a lot just in social media and watching people as we all season, I like to say, versus age, that people are having difficult conversations with themselves about the patterns of binge drinking that we all got really heavily involved in at a very early age. And I'm hoping, I don't have a teenager yet, but I'm hoping that those conversations are changing now in school. But
well, I feel hopeful that it'll be a shift the same way as smoking has been, although I know the vaping is a problem right now. But, I think that sometimes, like in the grand scale of history, we go through just big chunks of time where we're all doing the wrong thing. And then you kind of have a breakthrough, and then lots of conversations and different options are presented and like healthy alternatives. And then you kind of make a shift. And I think we are at that breaking point right now.
I think so too. And I think which is sort of what stemmed this conversation and goes into question number 3 for me, which is about sort of the slogans that are often out there. And I know you've written some incredible pieces in print journalism about slogans to moms groups, about, all the wine memes. So, what are some ways that we can change this conversation to new mothers, to encourage them to explore other options to combat the stress and the isolation and the depression that usually accompanies, especially early days of motherhood?
Well, I mean, I'll just start by sharing an example. When I was a new mom, I hadn't yet found she recovers. And I kind of went into a period where I wasn't in active recovery. So I was still sober, but I wasn't working on my recovery. And I found new motherhood very difficult. I had terrible sleep deprivation. I was just, my identity felt fractured. I didn't know who I was. And like, I felt like I really struggled. And I could only see it kind of after the fact from the rear view mirror that I had like, you know, and my anxiety was way over the top. But basically, one day, you know, I was so sick of in my parent group, which was a place that I really valued, that I got a lot of great support from. And I really admired the women in it. I was just so sick of the LCBO comments, the wine, the beer, that just sort of like, like toddler tantrum, like you wouldn't believe my day. And then it's just like, well, like LCBO is open until, you know, 8 o'clock and like, there's always wine. And it just was like on and on and on. And I finally just, you know, waded in and I wrote a comment, or you know, put a post up. I was like, you know, it really isn't helpful for me when I can't drink and I read all these like, you know, comments, and I find it actually quite alienating because you know, this is, I don't know why this is being suggested as the ultimate way to solve these problems, because it sure as hell isn't, you know, like it's only to make things worse. So I think only by sort of standing up to and I know that not everybody's comfortable doing that, especially in recovery. I mean, by this time I was, you know, year 4 or whatever in my sobriety. But I think that by sort of making people examine it differently and being, you know, when people do joke about like, oh my gosh, like, thank God there's tequila, just be like, well, actually, you know, mothers they need actual real support. They need, like, we need to shift the fact that, you know, daycare costs like $2,000 a month or whatever it is, you know, and like these types of things. And I think you can find a way to say it that doesn't feel like you're judging that person.
Yeah.
Or I think you can find a way to sort of break through those conversations that doesn't also make it sound like you're this sort of sanctimonious, like righteous individual, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think it's about that. And, you know, it is through, as much as I think social media probably plays a role in all of this as well, like just in terms of like mental health, you know, our depression, anxiety, in the way that even the people who sort of are talking about imperfection sort of seem to have a perfect existence. But there has been some breakthroughs because of social media with people, you know, there's definitely, I don't know how many, but at least dozens of moms who sort of, you know, have signs up and be like, you don't need motherhood, or was it alcohol is not a requirement of motherhood, or, you know, just like all these types of things. And I just think it's like you sort of, everybody's looking this way for so long, and you lose track, you lose sight of just other options. So
right. Well, and then the other, oh, hi, MJ. We're just right in the thick of it. So I'm just I might get you to mute just in case there's background noise, and then you can jump in. One of the things I was just going to say was that for me as a new mom, I didn't really, you know, I never really confronted that conversation about alcohol until later. So my son got diagnosed with autism when he was in senior kindergarten going into grade 1. Mm-hmm. And that was actually the first time. So alcohol has just always been a part of our world, mostly socially. And that was for me when I noticed that there was a huge shift in the way that I was using alcohol. And I actually said it in a mom's group once, that I noticed, because there were, you know, some chit chats about alcohol and using it to combat the stress of motherhood. And I said, I'm actually noticing that I'm starting to use alcohol now to dull the pain that I'm feeling about having a child with autism. And the conversation that we're having is around neurotypical kids. And I've never had that. And I've never had that sort of textbook experience of being a mom. And now I'm afraid that I'm going to, you know, go down a darker path myself. So that was sort of my first experience with introducing it for different reasons. But again, it's been something that I've tried to sort of be true about, to talk about, that I recognize I have chosen to keep alcohol in my life for now. I don't know if it will be forever, but for now it is. But I try to watch the use of it for me, and when it goes from social use or just, you know, enjoyment to I'm using it for the wrong reasons, and it dulls the pain.
Yeah.
So yeah, MJ came in and with this big smiling face, and we're like talking about very dark stuff. So feel free to jump in if you'd like. MJ, for those of you that don't know, this is MJ, my partner, who's with Soul Fuel Fitness and doing our talks here. It's going to lead to our last sort of heavy question, which is a great sort of accompaniment to what we were just talking about, the stress of it all, and parenting and mothering and anxiety, OCD, kids in school. Pandemic hits. Alcohol sales, I think it's even higher now, but the statistic I got was 45% sales increase in the LCBO. Like when I was in Florida trying to get back to Toronto, people were like, the border's closing, but more importantly, the LCBO might close. And people were like,
yeah,
you know, so, you know, how does that work? You know, how have you noticed that in sort of the recovery world? There's a lot of isolation. There's a lot of terrible, terrible things in the news.
Yeah.
I would think the drive to dull the pain is stronger.
It has hit the recovery world like it has hit the rest of the world in terms of like relapse is a common thing right now. And you know, I'm not talking about alcohol specifically, but if you look at the death rate of opioid use in Canada right now, it's like way higher than it was last year. So yeah, like I would love to say that us in recovery know all the tools to like get through this, but that's not the truth. You know, there's a lot of people who are not able to keep it together all the time. And I don't blame them. We're living through very, very difficult times, and there's so many layers that people are dealing with. And but what has been working is staying constantly connected to a community that you feel is healthy for you. So, you know, for me, it is my weekly She Recovers meetup with women in like the Toronto surrounding area. They have them 2 times a day for like a broader group. This is a group with 270,000 women in it worldwide. Okay. So like,
amazing.
This is not like 15, you know, we're not even talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And that's just a small percentage of the millions that are dealing with all these issues. But so connection and figuring out what you need in your day that is sort of your non-negotiable like self-care. So for me, it's like nature walks is like critical for me. And I would say that that's almost as important as my online virtual meetings. You know, I work out with MJ, and that's incredibly helpful. I have creative outlets, you know, that are important to me. Some people are like big readers, and that is a healthy form of escapism. You know, like I love films, I love TV. Like I get like really deep into series, and like there's nothing wrong with that. Like, what else are you gonna do right now? So, you know, finding things that lift you up, that make you feel good, that aren't drinking, whatever that is. And sometimes it takes a lot of time to figure that out. A lot of people who've been drinking for so long have a hard time recognizing, well, what do I like doing other than this? Like, what is my outlet?
And it's the go-to for so many people. I mean, one of the things that you know, I'm really open about, and sometimes we were chatting about it, it can piss people off, and I'm like, oh, Leslie, I'm really strict. I don't drink during the day. So I am the mom who goes out for the Chardonnay lunches. I don't drink wine either. I really only drink beer, but I go out for the lunches with some women friends, and I will not drink during the day. I will not drink before 5 o'clock. Most of the time it's not a problem. Sometimes I'll admit it, you know, especially going cottaging and things like that. It's like, oh, come on, it's 11 o'clock, let's crack a beer. And I don't. And sometimes I struggle with that. I have to be very mindful of like, this is how I'm structuring my alcohol use. And so I have to, and in pandemic, when we were in isolation, we live in an 800 square foot condo. we were completely just isolated here. It was awful. My mother died in the middle of it, and I could have just annihilated myself all day long, and it would have felt really, really nice, I'll be honest, to just turn that off. But I have a young kid, and I know myself, and so I run at 5 o'clock every night through the neighborhood, sometimes with my middle finger in the air going, fuck all this shit, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And that then sometimes deters it from not happening at all, or it delays it. And you know, those are some conscious choices.
I mean, and then, I mean, getting back to your original question, it's like those of us who've been in recovery for a long time, we have really learned and practiced that whole one day at a time.
Yeah.
And that, honestly, I still use that. And, you know, if you're like, I don't know how to stop drinking, it can feel like this sort of enormous thing. Like, are you fucking kidding me? I can't stop drinking. I've got like, you know, I've got a 40th birthday coming up. I've got like all these things. Although right now, really, we don't have anything too much on the horizon. But I mean, it can feel impossible, but you just have to break it down to little chunks. And like, if you're like, okay, it's 6 o'clock. This is when I usually open up a bottle of wine. What am I going to do? It's like, you get out for a walk. You gotta call a friend. You've gotta like pick up the phone and get on an AA hotline or whatever, or like join one of the gazillion virtual meetings. I mean, recovery has actually never been as accessible as it is right now. You don't have to walk. You don't have to get out of the house and find a babysitter. You can like do it online. And if you don't want to do it in Toronto because you're like super private and scared, go to a meeting in New York City, go to one in London, England, like have fun with it, explore. They're never boring. You know, they might be, you might question some of the philosophies. You might be uncomfortable with the mention of God. Just let it just roll over. Get from what you need, walk away with what it is that like is helpful for you, and just leave the rest. And you'll never, I mean, there's no like films that are more interesting than the conversations and stories that you'll hear at a recovery meeting.
Right. And I was just going to say, and you have the option of better coffee sometimes than potentially a church basement 1960s percolator. MJ, you may want to weigh in on our last question. So we're going to end on a bit of a fun note to lighten the topic, and then I will open up the chat line if people want to ask questions or share anything or get more information about She Recovers, or anything from Jen. She's just a wealth of knowledge in so many areas. So, you know, I see everywhere we were talking about social media and the rosé all day, the rosé all day mantra. If you could design the perfect mom's day out, what would it look like for you? Like the perfect one?
Well, Leslie, I sat down and I tried to figure this out before the call, and I realized, you know what? I don't really like big social gatherings. I'm kind of an introvert at heart, which most people would probably not quite understand.
That works well for this time of
But yeah, life. Like I much prefer one-on-one, you know, and for me, like my ultimate sort of like soul, I don't know, just like filler-upper is when I have go for a walk and I call a friend and I like just talk for 45 minutes. And that's something you can do right now in the pandemic. But if it wasn't pandemic days and I was thinking about what would be fun, you know, I mean, I'm always up for like a dinner party, and sometimes if it's like a dinner party with a cause, that sort of brings another element to it, that where the wine isn't the focus. I thought like a clothing swap might be fun, like a baking evening, book club. Like I know a lot of people are into essential oils and some people make fun of that. Whatever, you know what, like no judgment, whatever you do that it makes you feel good. And it's like book clubs that are, you know, have amazing tea selections. Like it's just, there really isn't, there isn't anything that you can't do that you are already doing, but just change, you know, whatever is there. So like bring amazing snacks and like have,
just get very creative.
Have great non-alcoholic mocktails. And there's lots of like Seedlip is there. There's lots of different companies now doing amazing stuff. So
there are. MJ, what's your dream non-rosé all day mantra day out?
Well, I'm, you know what, it's interesting. Hi, everybody. because I spend so much time doing extrovert activities, and I would say, you know, it sounds like such a cliche for me to be saying this, but exercise, dance, music, human connection, be it online or in person, you know, whatever we can sort of swing right now. It's such a natural endorphin enhancer, and it just fuels you in a different way than alcohol does. So
Yeah.
obviously I'm a huge advocate of that. But for me personally, I mean, the idea of having time alone is like mind blowing. So it would look like a bath with like a really good tea, like an herbal tea that tastes like yummy things, and a book. And I'm talking like Epsom salts, and I refill the bath twice because I'm in there for 2 hours. You know, where it gets cold and then you have to put more hot water in it. And then you have to shower afterwards because you've been lying in your own filth for 2 hours, like that kind of self-care. I'm big into massages, like a walk by myself, a nap. Like, oh, this sounds stuff, but you know, in terms of like where I refill my well, that tends to be where
like
it is.
That what's the word? I can't never pronounce it. Heidi, yeah, like that.
I don't even know. It's I think it's
Norwegian,
Swedish or
Scandinavian.
Norwegian.
Yeah. See, I'm very good. Mine is hilariously different. Mine would be like exercise first, always, like an intense, like one of your fit pop classes, like loud 80s music, dancing, or a big run, or like a Ninja Warriors workout with like blaring Van Halen. I can't even talk about it. Like that kind of music. And then shower. You need to shower after, of course, but it doesn't have to be lengthy, just so that you're not, you know. And then a poutine cake. Like so I don't like dessert, but poutine cake, I get one every year for my birthday, and it's so good. And it's like a cake, and you cover it with like juice. It used to be called Juice for Life Fresh. They do one with like kale and stuff on top. So it's fries, like miso gravy, whatever the cheese, and then like kale chips and stuff on it. And then 90210 or Felicity or Melrose Place Marathon.
Wow, you've thought it out.
Oh, yeah. I'm into it. I'm into all of that.
And you're all coming when this shit is over in my 800 square foot condo. You can all smush in and breathe all over each other. Okay, we're gonna wrap because we could talk all day, but I don't see any questions that came through on the chat beforehand. So if anybody would like to unmute themselves, they're welcome to. You're welcome to show your face. I see one question come in on the chat. Oh, it's from okay, so we have one question here. When is alcohol a problem? That's very good. Dr. Jen, when is alcohol a problem?
Well, I mean, I think it is a problem for you when it is a problem for you. I think that people sometimes get caught up in like the kind of list of like ticking off things to distinguish whether they have a problem or not. And I think that's another thing that's really cool about recovery today is that, you know, we're kind of getting rid of the labels. So I've started using, even though I'm totally okay with calling myself an alcoholic, I have started using language, alcohol use disorder, because I think it acknowledges that, you know, it looks different on everybody. And it also, we have stereotypes of what an alcoholic looks like, you know, drinking out of a paper bag, like, just whatever, like drinking all day, like not, you know, doing real harm to everybody. And that doesn't have to be where the problem, that like, we don't have to circle that and be like, that's a problem. But over here, you know, this woman who's using a bottle of wine to sleep at night, oh, that's not a problem because she isn't like, you know, she isn't hitting her kids or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be an extreme version to be a problem. It can be a problem because you feel like you're just not your best self, like when you're drinking, or, you know, you're waking up with a foggy head and a headache and you don't have the energy to deal with your kids, you know, or or you feel like your work is suffering, or your marriage is strained because of it, or you know that it's unhealthy for you to be going to bed, or with a bottle of wine, or that you decide I'm going to have like 2 glasses of wine, but then you can never stop at that. That's a problem, so.
Right. Okay, that's there's a couple more that come in here. So there was a thank you for joining in and for having this very difficult, uncomfortable conversation, and for sharing your recovery experience, Jen. Someone has said, Jen is always so inspiring. I'm glad I was able to join. Thanks for a great session. We're just getting lots of thanks. So I'm going to do a last call out. If anybody has a question, I see somebody on sideways. Tara, do you have a question that you wanted to ask?
Okay.
There we are.
Am I unmuted here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm terrible at Zoom. No, I loved what you mentioned about physical pain, because I came to alcohol later in life. I'm 39, and I didn't start drinking until 3 years ago when I was recovering from back surgery and going off my pain meds. And the combination of physical pain and emotional pain sort of led me to that. And also I loved what you said about we turn to alcohol instead of reaching out for support. And that's what I did. So, and yeah, Jen's amazing. She Recovers has been the biggest catalyst in my recovery. So.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that, Tara. That means a lot. And you know what, that's why we wanted to have these conversations, because, and I have a couple of my friends from high school on here who they knew me as party girl. But I suffer from severe endometriosis. I got diagnosed when I was in my teens, and it's very complicated, and I do not tolerate pharmaceutical drugs. And the best pain relief I get is from alcohol. Absolutely. And I'm really open about that. And that's again why I'm very cautious about my alcohol use, because I can tell if it's going the wrong way. And as I said, I haven't decided 100% if it's what way it's going to go for me, but I am very aware of how it can be misused and where that line starts to be crossed. So thank you for sharing that, Tara. It's a very hard thing.
And too, it's so acceptable. And it's like you see the mugs, coffee mugs, this might be wine. Well, what if it is? Is that cool? Like, that I'm dropping my kid off with wine in my coffee cup? Like it's.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's become this big joke, and it's, I don't know when that happened. Like if I guess it's always been there, or it's just a different drug. I think back in the 60s, it was the, Mother's Little Helper, the Valium, or, and it just changes form. And your story is very common, Tara, with the back pain and the starting off on pain medication and then moving into another substance.
And it's funny because I didn't drink until I was 30. I grew up in a sober household. So, even it's like, oh, am I an alcoholic? People would be like, no way. Like, no, but it can happen at any age.
Yeah, sure can. It
I got pushed back when I started recovery. Like I had friends who were just like, yeah, but you drink a lot, but like that's not you, and sometimes you have to go through that uncomfortable place and be like, I know, what's hurting me, and I know what is also happening in my household. I might not be presenting that way to my social group on a Saturday night, but I know that my husband is like at his wit's end, and I know that I'm like passing it on the floor, and I know that I'm like vomiting in the toilet, like I know that.
Yeah.
So you gotta tell the other people to you gotta just ignore.
Yeah. And that's hard to do with social pressure. I see that we have Melissa on, and Melissa, you have a question that you'd like to share?
Maybe not so much a question, just more of a comment. Hi, Jen.
Hi.
Jen and I grew up together in Ontario. I'm now in Montreal, and she suggested that I come to this. And I just wanted to share with people here. So I am an alcoholic. I remember when Jen first, I remember reading it on social media when she was, you did like a 10-day chronicle or something along those lines. I think it was in 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was pregnant with my first child, and and I remember being really surprised because although I'm a little bit older than Jen, we grew up in very similar social circles, and we have a lot of the same friends, and it was always this party, party, party. And so I know exactly what she's talking about when it was just so easy to go out, and people never thought you had a problem because everybody else was as drunk as you were, or at least that's what I thought. But I remember thinking at the time how courageous Jen was to bring this to the forefront and to start this conversation. This was back in 2012, and I didn't know anybody who was an alcoholic, although now there's more and more of us. But I think, I think it has been such a taboo subject, and people, it's, whether it's with regard to mental wellness or whatever it is, people don't want to have these difficult conversations. And I was so proud of Jen. And actually, when I started my recovery program, and when I got sober, I reached out to Jen, and we both went to a reunion last year, and I was really nervous because I only had about 4 months of sobriety under my belt. And I just, knowing that she was there, and knowing the courage that it must have taken her to come out to everybody and say, listen, I have a problem with alcohol, and this is what I'm doing. And just just so genuine and just so transparent, and sharing how she felt and what all of this really looked like. Because Jen's right, what people see on a Saturday night, and you don't see the bottles and bottles of wine that I've hidden all throughout my master bedroom, and my kids finding me passed out, or I've fallen down the stairs, or whatever that looks like. And I think we need to have further dialogue and further conversations about demystifying this, and people not maybe being uncomfortable with talking about this. And I really want to salute Jen and to all the other women who are part of this, recovery group, because I think it's so important that we are capable to support each other and to bring it out there. And, it's all about helping the next person. And, I've said this to Jen before, but, her sharing her story helped me get sober. And so hopefully my story will then help somebody else. So I wanted to thank everybody for
Thank you.
I'm very, my heart is warm right now. I always get very uncomfortable with feedback. I was like, right down on the table, but I really do appreciate it. And, I think, I strongly believe that secrets are toxic. Mm-hmm. And for me, especially because I was somebody who was creative and writing, it's like I couldn't breathe properly for me, holding that secret in, mm-hmm. and living this sort of life on the outside that was different from my life in reality. And I know that it's not as easy for a lot of people to come out and share that story, whether it's that family's not accepting of it, or that they're, they have a boss that would fire them, or colleagues that would look down on them, or if they're, if they're not I think a Black woman would have a much more difficult time sharing that vocally, just because the terrible stereotypes or prejudices. I know a friend of mine shared that, if the reason that the mummy wine culture isn't as big with people of color is that they have the threat of their kids being taken away, So I came from a space that was in a privileged position to be able to do that. And I knew that my consequences would be nothing, other than maybe a few people who rolled their eyes at me, or, whatever. But it was something I had to do. I was compelled to do it. And I think that, it's not something that everybody has to have a blog about or share like that. But the moment you start just opening up, when you feel comfortable and ready with just your social circle, your friends, the other parents at the school, it's you feel, it's this freedom. It's this breakthrough moment of just I just own it, mm-hmm. For me, my alcoholism is I have asthma, I have anxiety, I have skin rashes that kind of appear out of nowhere. That's just part of who I am, yeah. And I think that we have to get to that point where there's a comfort level about it that's just it's just matter of fact.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's,
sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, and I think that's sort of one of the reasons why, Jen, you're a real pioneer in doing this. And I remember following your story, you know, years back, and being very much, like Melissa just said, in awe of your bravery. And that's why we want to have these hard conversations, because they are really uncomfortable. It gives people a forum to be able to open up a little bit in a no judgment situation, and talk about like how hard all of this is, like just regular life. And I mean, it's like, you know, amplified now with everything that's going on. So I think they're really great conversations to have. And thank you for sharing, Melissa, with your story. I'm just checking.
I'm just going to sneak in, and you'll probably see it. But Jen, can you can you tell us a little bit about She Recovers, any meetup opportunities? Just so that anybody can have this takeaway.
Yeah, sure. I should just begin. I'm not a spokesperson for She Recovers. I like have been doing the program, and like I'm a volunteer. But basically, it was started. It's a really actually an amazing Canadian story, because it was started by a mother and daughter in Victoria, BC, and it has just. It just started by sort of sharing on Facebook, and it like grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. And now there's about 270,000 women worldwide who are involved in this movement. And what that looks like is, well, they have their principles and guidelines. And right now it's still, I would still say, like, even though they've been going since 2011, it's still like in its infancy in terms of like figuring out how they, how it looks in different cities. So in Toronto, we were actually the first group to start meeting, and we meet on Monday evenings, and we basically just like pop on similar to this. There's a little bit more of like a formula of like just, we share, we have like our, you know, we talk about a win from the week, we talk about what we're grateful for, and keep it pretty simple. There's no crosstalk, so people aren't jumping in with opinions, and, you know, just allowing people a space to kind of like share. And they have retreats. They have there's like Facebook groups where you could go on at any moment, you know, in the night and be like, I really want to drink right now, like I need help. And like usually what's super cool is that you get like a bunch of women chiming in from, you know, Toronto and Dallas and Los Angeles and London, England, and like they all have advice in that moment for you. And I know that I've used it in the past few years, because like even though I'm coming up on 10 years sober, that does not mean that I don't like hit moments where I'm like, oh my God, I fucking really want to like chug a bottle of wine right now. You know, I definitely have those days. And I've used that group for that, or I've used it for, you know, like I'm having a friction with my partner, or like I'm like feeling like my self-confidence is dipped, whatever it is. And people just share. And yeah, like Tara even mentioned there, it's like, even if you just sort of join the Facebook group, you see stuff happening, and you sort of soak it in, like, you know, like a sponge, even if you're not dialoguing directly. And I would say the same thing for like there's other groups on Facebook. Like I joined the Birds Papaya like fan group or whatever, and you know, there's in my day, I'll sort of just see somebody like talking about like, I left this abusive relationship and here's where I'm at in life, and like these are my kids and these are my struggles, and you just see women just like I'm gonna just like jump in and help you out. And even if I'm not even directly involved in that conversation, like feeling it is like this energy, you know. And I think so much of social media for too long has been about comparing and like, you know, my life doesn't look like that, and how come like she's like flawless and whatever. And there's still lots of that out there. And right now I'm like glued to those fashion reels where people are like, you know, like they're doing this and they've got like makeup and like jewelry, and I'm like, how do you even like pull this off? But there is a lot of good stuff on there as well.
I follow something on social media. It's called, I just talked to you about I love pop culture, like really cheesy pop culture. And there's something called Sober Celebrities, and they have a different featured celebrity, and it tells their story. And there's some fascinating, like Blake Lively, who's, you know, Gossip Girl, teetotaler, and she's married to Ryan Reynolds, and he owns a gin company. And there's some, you know, there's, but it's always curated night, and there's a little story about them, sometimes really dark, you know, it's
yeah. So, I mean, I think that, yeah, finding a community, whatever that looks like, is important. And it doesn't have to be a recovery community. It can be like Soul Fuel, you know,
yeah.
it can be like my camp alumni, like what Melissa was talking about, you know, it can be whatever that is that to you that you feel like you are a part of something and belong, and that you can reach out for support.
Absolutely.
So yeah, anyways, the She Recovers, if you just look them up, you'll see like you go to their website, you can see the different things they offer. And
MJ put it on the chat, so if
yeah,
anybody wants it, the links are there.
Yeah.
I think we have some of the links. You can get all the information also from the social
yeah,
media
and in
posts
normal
that they're
days they
doing.
have retreats, but these are not normal days. So
You can retreat in your own home in the just the luxury of your surroundings. I don't see any more questions, and I'm very aware of your time, Jen, and everyone's time here. Last call. This has been definitely, Jen, we've gone the longest with you, so this was our very.
It's a hot topic.
It is a hot topic. Yeah. And we will have more, and I want to thank you so much for joining us, Jen.
Thank you.
You're an amazing speaker. You're very motivating and inspirational. For those of you guys who are still online, and we showcase we've got a couple of good stuff. Our trial session is going to end at week 6. And for those of you, this will probably be a bit of a crossover. We are going to do week 6. We're going to finish with talking about grief, and however that looks. It can be grief from anything. It is stemmed from my own personal with the loss of my mom, but we're going to talk about all sort of digging deep and also how to process it a little more healthfully. So this may be a topic that might be of interest to some people here. But just stay connected to Daily Apple, Soul Fuel. You'll see all of our posts. And Jen, thanks again for coming.
Thank you. Thank
Yay.
you.
And
Everybody.
Dean.